She had to come in and tell me my baby was really, really ugly. And
Mhm.
it wasn't even like recoverable.
We've learned that number one, you have to see the problem. Somebody has to help you see the problem. Number two, you have to accept the problem. And then the next step is you have to build a plan how to solve the problem.
Years later, I turned it from this Bob driven disaster to it was a prototype. Essentially, it was a
Yeah.
prototype. And we squeezed every learning piece of, drop of juice out of that. And it was phenomenal.
Leaders, this is your opportunity to create the culture where you enable and empower your people and your teams to discover and accept a failure before it gets out of control.
Creating that right culture and creating that learning organizational culture where you move it from failure or whatever ego fear to it what can we learn from it. Entry music. Da, 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 da. It's the Bob and Josh show. Hey Josh, can
Are
I
we
start
ready?
the
Yeah.
episode?
Well, Bob's going to start the episode?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's do it.
You know what, Josh, I've been
What?
thinking about some stuff lately. One of the things, it's around the Titanic, and I've been wondering about the cost associated with that sunk ship,
Hmm.
and I don't know why. And it's something that it's a conundrum for me. I know that hurt conundrum
So
around.
wait, so wait, so wait. This is your like Thursday night ruminations. Like, let me think. What conundrum should I tackle?
Yeah,
I'm going to
and I was
tackle the
thinking of the sunk
Titanic.
cost associated with the
Hmm.
sunk Titanic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
Okay.
just
So
how to look. Go ahead. And that's not a good
you've been
segue. I know.
no, it wasn't. That was pretty
Lame.
like ham-fisted. I think is the like technical term of that of just
Oh,
trying to
oh,
like slam it
oh,
in there.
let me take that from you. Oh, ham fisting. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
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 You want to
Accurate.
you want to go for sumo, my friend? Yeah,
We
yeah.
do,
I
Bob.
opened up a can of sumo suit. Yes, I did.
So this is how the episode's starting. Welcome aboard, everybody. Here we go.
To the
It's going to
hand
be a
fisted
wild one.
sumo wrestling episode.
Oh, I think the reality is this segue has its own sunk cost, and we should probably step away from it with the real segue
Oh,
into.
I agree.
Yeah,
I
you
agree.
like that, Bob?
And let someone who's
Yeah,
good at it do it. Josh, after you.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yes. So sunk cost fallacy. This is a topic Bob has been wanting to talk about for weeks. For weeks, he's been saying this is the thing that we should talk about. So here we are. I'm excited because Bob finally gets what he wants. Bob's been pushing, begging for us to talk about that. And so here we are, ready to talk about sunk cost fallacy. What do you have, Bob?
I have a question for you, Josh.
No, you
Yeah, I
can't.
can.
You
Of
can't do
course,
that.
of course, I can. Josh,
Okay, bring
how
it
do
on.
you define sunk cost fallacy or sunk cost?
So that was as I was prepping for this episode because you've been pushing for this episode for weeks. I've
Would
had
you
plenty of time to
stop?
think about
Just
it.
stop it. I'm going up in octaves here. Stop. Stop it.
No, I am not going to stop. So sunk cost fallacy to me, the hardest part about it is recognizing that you're there.
Yeah.
And then I think once you recognize that you've gone down this path where the cost of achieving success or good or positive outcome is so expensive that you just have to like accept it and say, hey, we lost this one. That's okay. We got to let go and move on. And that's a common problem that I see in a lot of directions. I'd say the most tangible one that I've had to deal with over my years has been within the team. So there's somebody that's a part of the team, and we've spent time talking about this over the past month or so about PIPs, demotions, performance improvement, things like that, where a leader doesn't do the hard work to remove somebody, and they just kind of like let it fester, and it becomes an issue, and it's just very expensive, very costly for that person to remain a part of the organization, but nobody's willing to accept the sunk cost and just kind of let that person go and be able to move on. There's other things with technologies where, hey, we have this old technology, we should probably move on, but everybody's afraid to take that step. So to me, I think the first hurdle that people have to get over is there's always fear that seems to be holding people back of, okay, cool, if I give up, then what am I going to do? Because it's like, I've got this comfort blanket, I've got this thing that I'm holding on to. Maybe I don't love it, but at least it's a thing I've got. And so getting people to a point where they're willing to walk away seems and feels way harder than it should, especially from the outside. And I think that's where a lot of frustration within organizations shows up, is from the outside. People see it and they're like, why can't we just like walk away from that technology, that person, that customer, that whatever it is? But there's all these mental hurdles. People are unwilling or often unskilled in a way to figure out how to navigate away from it. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Well,
I was trying to
no, but
give
it
some
was a nice
examples of what
entry.
it
I think
is.
I like fear. I want to come back to it. I want to come back to what are the drivers, or what are some of the drivers for it, or and I think fear, as you were talking, it really resonated with me. But I wanted to define it first.
Hmm.
So to me, I'll just define it, not formally, and then see how you react to that. But to me, it's being stuck. So sunk cost fallacy, sunk cost thinking, is I've invested so much stuff into something that at the point that I'm at, and it could be a product, it could be sunk cost into a product, it could be sunk cost into an organization structure, it could be sunk cost into a company. Like I've been here 10 years,
Hmm.
right? It could be sunk cost into a person, like you were talking about, like pips and things like that. That I don't see a way clear. It's not worth it to me to cut. It's not worth it to me to change, or I don't see. I see it as a bad decision to change, and I don't look at alternatives. I don't look at it as an experiment. I don't look at it for options. I'm just, you could call it, stuck cost syndrome. Syndrome where you feel like you're stuck. So disagree with me, but that's sort of my definition of it, of sunk cost. Am I accurate, or?
Yeah, um, it's weird because when you're in the moment, which I think why the word fallacy is often used, is you almost don't see it. It's almost like you see it the opposite way of, oh, I've
That's
got to stay with this.
that's
I've got, you know, to use Bob's terms, I'm stuck and I don't know how to navigate away from it, and I'm not even sure I should navigate away from it. So I'm just going to ride it out and we're going to keep doing the thing. And that's where complacency will get you. And we've talked about getting pickled in various places where you've stayed there for too long and you've adopted that, and now you feel stuck and you don't know how to get out. So yeah, I think that's fair. I think the hardest thing is like getting somebody to like shake the cobwebs out of their brain and step back and look at the situation with a slightly different lens. And if you can help, like if you can do that yourself, or if somebody can help you do that, then a light bulb tends to go off. And then I think wheels start to turn and you build momentum into, okay, how am I going to undo this? How am I going to unwind myself from the situation I found myself in?
See, I think we hit something that's like awareness. I think one of the root problems is I don't think people. I mean, there's exceptions. Uh, Everything has exceptions, but I think out of 100 sunk cost scenarios, people don't even see it. Maybe
Right.
98% of the time, or 95 out of 100, and they can't see it. They don't can't see it, and they need an external helper. One story that came to my mind is I was working at a company, and I was the product owner for an automation framework. and at the time, and I still have some expertise in automation and test automation and frameworks and things. And I was doing an okay job, but what I didn't fully realize is it wasn't being architected well. And so we were just kept building and building and building it, and it was fundamentally flawed. Uh, and I didn't see it. And what was coloring me was I don't want to piss people off. I want to support the team. So sort of maybe servant mindset, et cetera. And then I hired Mary Thorne in as a director of QA, and she had to have a hard conversation with me like after a week or so. And this was back before I knew her, so this was we were just establishing our relationship. And I wasn't only the leader, Josh, I was the PO, if you will. And she had to come in and tell me my baby was really really ugly, and
Mm.
it wasn't even like recoverable. I had to like maybe that baby metaphor wasn't the right one to pick, but we had to throw out and start anew.
You had to throw the baby out with the bathwater
Yeah, yeah,
just to stick with the baby
yeah. You're
situation
gonna
in the
go with
background.
you're gonna go with it, and I was not happy with that answer
Yeah.
at all. And it took me maybe a week to come to grips with it. And I'd have been there forever. I mean, maybe eventually when we were actually, it was one fundamental flaw was scalability. So
Hmm.
probably after a year or two, I would have realized that the damn thing was not very scalable, and I would have been forced to do that. But it's that visibility, and I think the most of the time you need another voice. That's why an external consultant can help. You have to be open minded too. There's trust, there's open mindedness, but bringing in someone in to tell you that because I was blind. I had a blind side.
Yeah, to me, there's two parts in the sunk cost world. Number one, you have to get to a point where you actually recognize the issue. And as Bob said, usually a very effective way is to have a third party come in with a different lens that isn't as close to it.
Yep.
Because I think that's where a lot of people end up living is they're so close to it, it's hard to see that there's a problem.
Yep.
So, okay, somebody comes in, shines a light on the problem, and you have that oh shit moment. Like, oh boy, we got a problem. I'd say even then, 75% of people don't move on to that next step
Yep.
because it's often terribly daunting. And you talked about the situation that you were in where somebody had to tell you, hey, this situation's wrong. And number one, you had to accept it. That was step number one. But number two, you had to have not only the skill to figure out how you're going to navigate away from this, but the will to
Yep.
swim upstream for quite a long time to undo and rebuild or whatever the right terminology is, all of the things that have gone wrong. And that is where I see a significant portion of companies just recognize it and they like turn a blind eye like, okay, cool, well maybe if we ignore it, it's just going to go away and we'll be fine and everything's going to be okay. But eventually it's not.
I think you nailed like a second part. One, it's someone telling you, and then I'll use my story, admitting that I was wrong. So this Metacasters, I was wrong. I was making a mistake. So I had to explain this to other people. We had invested time and money into this automation framework, and so I had to talk to the test team, and they didn't want to. They didn't want to change. They, so every person on the test team was like, no, no, no. All right, we can fix it. And then I explained it to my peers and looked like a maroon. Uh, and explain what and I explained it to my boss. Like the great Bob Galen, had screwed the pooch, and, and we had to restart, which isn't a good, which is like you might as well just throw the cash out and in the can. And I'm not, but I think there's a lot of that around it, right? Hubris, ego, stuff around it, and it's just natural. It's human nature. It's not evil people, but trying to get yourself over that. Too. That's where I liked your 75. I don't know what the percentages are, but a lot of folks get stuck there. It's just too hard. It's just too hard to jump over that hurdle and start, correcting everything.
Yeah, well, I think so. I walked in with two steps. And what Bob showed us is there's really three. There's the first step of you got to see it. Somebody has to be able to
Yeah.
pull you out of the weeds and show you, look, this thing is wrong. This thing is broken. It's not going to work. And you have to have the willingness as the leader to accept that and be willing to do that. And that's where there's a huge hurdle for people to deal with because there's real world situations that could come up, right? Bob's team was like, no, it's fine. We're not going to do that. We're not going to unwind everything. Bob also has to go to his boss, the board, whatever, and say, yeah, all that money we invested in doing this, well, it didn't work out like we hoped. So can we get some more money to invest over
Exactly.
here like
Exactly.
this? Yeah, so that's step one, and the perceived peril that you put your career in a
Yeah.
situation like that is often very daunting, and people just opt out of it. And again, they go to turning the blind eye and just like, I hope it's going to be okay. I hope it's going to be okay. I hope it's going to be okay. And it's one of those things where what I've learned over the years is bad news doesn't age well. So that's the thing that I use in my mind when I get in situations like that. It certainly happens where I recognize, okay, somebody's helped me see that we have a problem. I've accepted it. I don't like it. And it's only going to get worse if I let it be here. And the thing that I've struggled with over the past like hour or so prepping for this episode was how do I make this analogy without talking about like a wound festering? Because I don't want people to be like, oh, that's gross, Josh. But like, I can't think of anything more painful than if you don't take care of that wound, it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And then maybe, that limb doesn't work as well. So you need to address, I know, Bob,
You need to
I
work on
told
this,
you.
my friend. I don't know.
I know. I've seriously for let's see, 2 hours now. I've been trying to think of something else to come up with, but that's all I've got. And we're here. The mics are on. So, Metacasters, sorry, that's the best I've got. But Bob's going to save the day. So we've learned that number one, you have to see the problem. Somebody has to help you see the problem. Number two, you have to accept the problem. And then the next step is you have to build a plan how to solve the problem. And those are three huge, difficult steps that you as a leader will have to go through.
I think there's a confidence thing too. As I'm sitting here thinking about it, it's not just asking for more money. Think about this conversation. Your home builder. You've engaged a home builder. I'm pulling this out of thin air, Josh. So save me if I can.
It's got to be better than my wound.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I was cringing, man. I'm like, ugh. So the home builder. So you engage them, you pay them money, they build your house. It's almost done, or it's close to being done, and they walk in and they're like, we built the wrong foundation. Okay. So sunk cost. So we need to tear it down and rebuild it. And it's going to, so you can tangibly look at the cost. But now you're looking at this builder. It was like me, I'm channeling my boss at this company when I went to them and said, now give me an additional, $3 million to do what I just failed at and give me another shot. Uh, and so the organization has to be fail friendly. The organization, I mean, relationships come into play. And all of it, there has to, because it's a confidence, it undermines confidence, right, of everything. So to me, that's like going into the fear. It's like, this isn't a trivial mistake. This is, I took 500,000, I took $1 million and I blew it. I learned my lesson and I need another $1 million. How many of us would do that with the same person? Right. Easily. And so yes, avoiding it, like as a builder, is it an effective strategy to put the little, the shingles on top and then get the hell out of Dodge before the house? Well, yeah, because, you're not going to, I don't know. It takes courage, I guess, is what I'm saying. There's
Yeah.
confidence. It takes courage to go there. It takes relationship building. I mean, there's some serious stuff here. If you're working for Attila the Hun, it's going to be you. If you know Josh, you and I have worked for a common person in the past. Uh,
Hmm.
G, the G man. I don't know if he would have bought that. So the culture plays a part in this avoidance as well. Um, Naturally so. Any
Yes,
reactions, Josh?
absolutely. So we're going to get to the final piece of how you figure out how to do something about it. But leaders, this is your opportunity to create the culture where you enable and empower your people and your teams to discover and accept a failure before it gets out of control. The more you create a culture that is fear driven, the more likely it is that you're going to end up with a situation where you find out last minute something is totally busted
Yep.
and you may not be able to navigate away from it. It might be too late. And that happened because you, as a leader, created an environment of fear
Yep.
as opposed to one that accepts the complexity of the world that we live in and the complexity of the market, the industry, just building, delivering software, accepts the complexity of that and enables and empowers your team to identify and recognize failures along the way and be nimble. Bob and I teach and preach agile all of the time. We aren't necessarily talking about the frameworks. We're talking about a business's ability to be agile, to recognize, ooh, we're off course and let's make a quick change before it's too late. When you build an organization like that, you reduce the likelihood that you're going to get into situations where you have a late discovery that is unrecoverable, because that's ultimately what you need to avoid. And the best thing you can do right now, tomorrow, is make sure your culture enables those discoveries and empowers people to identify them and do things about them. So that is, to me, that is the action that I would like every listener to walk away with.
Yep.
Is if you've had a rash of late meaning it might be late that you've discovered them. They might have been known for a while, but you as a leader discover them, and now the cost to overcome them is massive. If you've had a rash of those, the likelihood is that you have a unhealthy culture that disempowers people and removes their willingness to talk about those things openly and freely until it's like the last possible moment. So hopefully you don't have that. But if you do, this is where you need to go back and listen to a bunch of the episodes that Bob and I have talked about, where we talk about creating the culture, creating safe spaces. When you do that, this problem reduces drastically.
100%.
Okay,
100%.
off my soapbox.
I agree. As you were talking, I was thinking of the word exposure, and the exposure to me, using my house analogy, exposure is we've already moved in, right? So builder knew it, and then what? One of my kids dropped through the staircase, something, and suddenly it starts crumbling. But now the exposure is I'm in the house, we're living in the house, we have furniture in the house, etc. So this notion of early, get it before your customers get it. I've been in this case, I've been in this situation, Josh, and it gets exponentially more challenging if we have a flawed app that we deploy and it's in customers' hands for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew it. I mean, I've heard, you all have heard this. We knew it was a problem. Or it's out in the marketplace. We have competitive market awareness, and withdrawing it, it's not only it's going to have financial damage, it's going to have reputational damage, etc. So I think the exposure, the early, is also risk exposure avoidance. Because as you go, then that decision, I mean, and think about it. We might let something flawed or something that can do harm out there. I mean, I'm sure car companies are doing things like that. When they had the recall, right, they probably knew it. And they're waiting. Oh, no, oh, the engine exploded. Well, they knew the engine was going to explode, but they increased this exposure. Don't do that. I'm
Yeah.
sure there's some sunk cost fallacy going on there.
Yeah. Well, I lived through that with Volkswagen. So I bought Volkswagen's clean diesel that they had been advertising was cleaner than the regular gas cars and all of that stuff. Turns out they knew that it was not clean. In fact, it was 40 times the legal limit, but they actually built software to like trick the detection systems. So not only did they knew it, but they like built tools to hide it.
Yeah.
And you know, bad things happen. They had to buy all of those cars back. Not just like they had to replace, like they bought the cars back. The government determined the value of those cars. So there was lots and lots of money that was lost. And now the recovery that they are going through is massive because they lived in this sunk cost fallacy of, oh, we know this is a problem, but yeah, we're too far into it. So we're just going to actually, we're going to lean into it and we're going to try and divert people away from it and trick them. So yeah, it's a real thing.
I like the way this has complemented some of our previous shows, and like the demotions and things, taking action, or like you alluded to earlier, pips and things. I want to take us away. There's categories of this to think about. It's the same phenomenon, but for example, there's the product. There's sunk cost thinking in backlogs. There's sunk cost thinking in MVPs. There's sunk cost thinking in uh, backlog lists or value streams. There's sunk cost list in team, like you were alluding to, team members, team member performance. There's sunk cost thinking in structure, org structure. I promoted Josh, right? I actually went out on the line and promoted Josh. So now it's not just Josh's performance; it's my reputation. So,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm sunk into that. Now, some of it, people are laissez-faire. Like I joke about, a lot of organizations have the reorg of the month club or
Yeah.
something like that. So, so maybe there's a corollary to sunk cost fallacy, which is, you know, random like berserko-ness when it comes to change. And don't do either one of those. But you can see it in org structures, is what I'm trying to say. You can see it in teaming structures. You can see it in product dynamics. You can see it in people investments, etc. So it's sort of like everywhere, I think.
I would argue that the organizations that have continual reorgs have a very real sunk cost fallacy going on. Whoever the leader of that organization is, somebody continues to allow that person to drag their giant organization through reorgs on the regular,
Yeah,
which likely means people are in and out and all, and
yeah.
just morale's low, all of those things. So somebody of the chain needs to address that issue and get that fixed.
Ah,
But they're
I'm
probably,
with you. I'm with you.
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
agree.
So yeah, some leader, be it the CEO, the VP, or whatever, needs to recognize. Wait a minute, why does this leader that's a part of my organization keep reorging?
Exactly.
Maybe there's a problem there, and maybe it's not
It's not the
like what's the
organization.
common theme. Yeah, it's not the organization. So maybe I should do something about that.
I wanted to throw out a thought to everyone. Don't be hopeful. I think there's
Mm.
too much hope in the world sometimes in certain situations. So be hopeful about the environment correcting, be hopeful about the economy, be hopeful, but don't be hopeful that things. There is a case. There's probably a minor percentage. Like maybe that automation framework would have self-corrected. It wouldn't have, but maybe I could have been hopeful, and maybe 1 out of 100 times it magic would have, pixies would have came in and re-architected things. But I think don't be hopeful. Be a realist. I think part of the reaction to be a realist and trust your advisors. So going back again to Mary, I hired her. I didn't have a relationship with her, but I hired someone good. It would be like bringing Josh in. The last thing you want to do is bring Josh in, but then not listen to him. So check his resume, bring him into a situation, but then listen and follow on with that, whether you see it or not. Like I didn't see it initially, and it wasn't blindness, or I wasn't. How do I say it? I wasn't seeing it as austere as she was.
Hmm.
But part of me, I actually needed to support her. I felt like yes, there's this issue, but I also want to support her opinion because I just brought her in as a leader, and I want to, make, I can be wrong. So why don't
Yeah.
I trust her judgment, etc. So
Well, when you're the person that recognizes the issue, there's a journey that you have to take parts of the organization through of number one, getting them to accept it. Number one, like, yes, we have this problem. And then number two, you have to work through getting them to understand the scale of it and the importance and the urgency that we have to go attack the problem. So that leads into, okay, we've seen it, we understand it, we accept it's a reality. Now the final hurdle is, what the heck are we going to do about
yeah,
this? We've accepted reality, we've accepted the fault, we've talked to everybody we need to talk to, we have support, we have funding to go fix the problem. Now, how do you regain the confidence and feel like you can make the right decision? You can make the new answer better and you're
right,
not going to revisit this situation, because that's a very real fear that everybody has throughout the entire thing. Everybody that's funding you, you personally, your team, gosh, are we going to get this right? Like, how do we know? So we were wrong before. How are we going to be right this time? And that's a very real hurdle. But the good news is you have a lot of new data. You have very clear data on what didn't work. So that can make sure you land in a much better spot. But that should encourage you to build all those checkpoints along the way. To me, that's always been one of the things that I've tried to do is accept the reality, accept the complexity of the problem you're trying to solve. So what I try to do in situations like that is, how do I build as many feedback loop and checkpoints into
yeah,
this process as possible so that I know a lot sooner when we're off course and we can recorrect when a recorrect is just like a matter of days, number of lines of code or something like that, and it's not something to panic about. So that's a tool that you can use to help provide you and the organization with the confidence in, you can take the agile approach. Again, little a agile. I'm not talking scrum, safe, any of that jazz. Just be nimble, be aware, get the feedback loops rolling as quickly as possible to help you make those micro adjustments along the way so that you find the right path. Because it's going to be unlikely that on day zero of this new thing you're going to go build, version 2.0, that you have perfect clarity on everything you need to build and it's going to be absolutely wonderful. Reality of that is very, very, very low. So build yourself all of those feedback loops, all those checkpoints along the way for you to be able to go like, uh-oh, we're off, but that's no big deal because we're just going to make this little pivot and we're good. And you have a bunch of those over the way and you land in the right spot. But you're never going to walk away on day zero with like, yeah, I have every answer I need and it's perfect and we just need to execute.
I mean,
It's not going to be that
I
way.
think I'm really leaning into what you're saying, Josh. I'm going back to that example, and I remember the thing. It wasn't confidence in Mary. I mean, I pivoted. It was that, but I pivoted in my own mind. I had to get to a place myself so I could sell it internally. And the thing that I realized is what we can learn from that. So literally, I switched from that was an automation product or project to it was an automation prototype. And we learned so much. Now we have to take the time
Mm-hmm.
to mine that and then build all of those learnings into the next thing. So I think part of this is creating psychological safety is a part of it, culture is a part of it, creating that right culture and creating that learning organizational culture where you move it from failure or whatever, ego, fear, to it. What can we learn from it? Oh, and I never said it. The next automation project did it. It was phenomenal. So we took all of those learnings. It's not a time thing, but we wisely took all of those learnings, and then some other people's Mary's experience, and we had a really phenomenal acceleration curve, and it really nailed on our requirements and things like that. So years later, I turned it from this Bob driven disaster to it was a prototype. essentially as a
Yeah.
prototype, and we squeezed every learning piece of drop of juice out of that, and it was phenomenal what we learned, and then how it helped us, do release two.
Agreed. I mean, that's the mindset that you have to have because the world that we live in, talking to tech leaders, product leaders, things like that, there are a lot of variables and there are a lot
Yep.
of challenges and there are a lot of companies that struggle along the way to execute and never reach the place that you've reached.
Yep. Hey, how
So
do you feel
now
about
you
this
just have to
episode?
continuously.
What did we
I
did we not cover? Because I know you. I didn't do a good job of pre-planning, Josh, and just like always, you you were doing hours of pre-planning, and so did we miss anything?
I don't think so.
Can you share your planning documentation with me?
No,
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 no
it's
transparency.
all up here.
Oh, it's
No,
all
it's all
up
up here.
here
This giant. I have to use this giant cranium for
or
something.
something.
So
I'll go.
yeah,
I'll go into. So I
yeah,
think fork is it.
sure.
I could be. I'm the bobinator, but I can also be the forkinator. So
Sure.
from beautiful downtown Cary, North Carolina,
And beautiful downtown Fuquay Varina, North Carolina.
I'm Bob Galen.
And I'm Josh Anderson.
Shake
Shake
and
and
bake.
bake.
Take care, y'all.